Glad to see you in these precarious days. I'm behind me. I've added something to my backdrop, which is a new favorite thing over here from Clara, age 4. It's her picture of, of a church. She said it's kind of like our church, but it's got more color and windows. So that's what she colored. So I have it back here now. To remind me of the church that we are always trying to create for future generations as well as for ourselves and in our time and place here and now, to fill it with color and light and vibrancy, even as our doors are closed, to keep our church alive. So if you have a chalice near you or in your heart or mind, feel free to light it with me. I have one here from our Church at Home kits. So I'm going to light this. I invite you to just take a breath. In just a moment to hold in your heart. That's 2020. I just blew my chalice out. Good Lord. Okay, there we go. There, take 2. We need as many chalice flames and to keep lighting and relighting them as often as we can and need to. So take a breath and bring to mind those in this community that you've been able to connect with in some way, online or otherwise, or cards or calls. Bring to mind those in this church community that you miss and are patiently waiting to see again somehow, but you're holding in your heart. Bring to heart and mind those ancestors in this church and far beyond it, in the larger family of all souls, that you are carrying with you into election day, whether, I'm assuming most of you have already voted, but even if you have, you're still entering election day. Who are you carrying with you so that you aren't going it alone? So take a breath. I have this first reading from Jane Kenyon. I invite you to imagine you're coming back to church when it's safe to do so. This is one of my favorite at this time of year. It's called Potluck at the Wilmot Flat Baptist Church by Jane Kenyon. Can you imagine potlucks again? Oh, someday. We drive on the flat on a clear November night. Stars and planets appear in the eastern sky, not yet in the west. Voices rise from the social hall downstairs, the clink of silverware and plates, the smell of coffee. As we walk into the room, faces turn to us, friendly and curious. We're seated at the speaker's table next to the town historian, a retired school teacher who is lively and precise. The table's decorated with red, white, and blue streamers and framed Time and Newsweek covers of the president just elected. Someone has tied peanuts to small branches with red, white, and blue yarn and set the branches upright in lumps of clay at the center of each table. After the meal, everyone clears food from the tables and tables from the hall. Then we go to the sanctuary where we hear poems from the pulpit. On the way home, we pass the white clappered faces of the library and the town hall, luminous in the moonlight. And I remember the first time I ever voted in a township hall in Michigan. That same wonderful smell of coffee was in the air then, and I found myself among people trying to live ordered lives. And again, I am struck with love for the Republic. I love that last phrase. I find myself among people trying to live ordered lives. How hard is it to live orderly lives these days? A different world we're in. So I'm grateful for you taking the time to be together tonight and gathering. My main agenda, hope for this evening, is I have a few poems that I'll be glad to share and a piece of music, but I also want to have some time to open it up for all of you, any of you that have been holding some pieces of poetry or readings close to you in these days, or music that you can share or just speak about, or how you have been rooting yourself in a sense of maybe resilience or hope, maybe strength or perseverance, maybe uncertainty. How have you been shoring up your sense of why it matters to vote, why it matters to keep engaging and keep going forward? So I just want to pause there and open it up if folks have brought things, and if you didn't, that's fine. But if folks have something to share, either reflections or pieces of art and poetry, you can, yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Say you can raise your hand or use the chat to signal. Go ahead.
All right. This is a Plutarch quote that we read at a service a couple of years ago that Julie's mother, Marlene, held dear. She was very active in politics, and as a county chair in Story County, Iowa, gave this quote as a handout to her executive committee. And when she died in 1980, Julie's father, Cliff, had it framed, so we have it in our house. Plutarch. They are wrong who think that politics is like an ocean voyage or a military campaign, something to be done with some particular end in view, something which leaves off as soon as that end is reached. It is not a public chore to be gotten over with. It is a way of life. It is the life of a domesticated political and social creature who is born with a love for public life, with a desire for honor, with a feeling for his fellows, and it lasts as long as need be. It is not simply office holding, not just keeping your place, not just raising your voice from the floor, not just ranting on the rostrum with speeches and motions. Politics and philosophy are alike. Socrates neither set out benches for his students, nor sat on a platform, nor set hours for his lectures. He was philosophizing all the time, while he was joking, while he was drinking, while he was soldiering. He was the first to show that all your life, all the time, in everything you do, whatever you are doing, is the time for philosophy. And so also it is of politics. And then Marlene wrote at the end, this, I believe, is what it is all about. Best regards, Marlene.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a beautiful piece. Story City, Iowa, or Story County, did you say? And Story City's in Story County, right?
Yep. Story City is, Ames is the largest city in Story County.
That was the last place my grandfather was a Lutheran pastor, was in Story City before they retired and then moved to northern Minnesota. Beautiful. Others have writings or things you've been holding. Yeah, Mary, please. You can unmute there, yeah.
Unmute?
Yep.
Or mute? Am I on? Oh, am I on now? Okay. This is personal from my own history. Back in the 1940s, when I was a young girl, my father was an election judge counting the ballots, and he would take me down to the courthouse in this very small town in Wisconsin. And I would sit on a bench, and they would have, I think, a blackboard with each candidate on there from the local to the state to the national. And as the phones rang, they would change the numbers, and it was a very, very exciting time. And I really grew to love elections and love going down there with him, and all of the energy around it and all of the good feelings, which we don't have this year. But, and so as things have changed and you sort of get the predictions on TV, it's a whole lot different from what I experienced then. But I found it as a tremendous responsibility. And so with the whole UU thing that Ann Black-Sinek was organizing, I think I wrote out 40 postcards and 20 letters or something to people in Texas and Georgia. And as I hear that a lot of people are voting there, I'm hoping that that made a difference, because it was really just the responsibility and the rights that we have, that we need to get out and vote. But I love elections for that reason. And we always talked a lot of politics at our dinner table. So probably an experience none of the others of you have had because you're not as old as I am. But so.
That's a lovely story, Mary. Beautiful. And I just love that sense of connection and legacy and lineage of people passing on values, and also excitement for elections and all that. It inspired me to, post-pandemic, get my children more involved on election day.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Connie.
Yeah, I'll just kind of piggyback onto what Mary was talking about, because I'm thinking a lot about my mother these days, and she was always an election judge. She loved politics, lifelong Democrat, but she'd watch the conventions, both of them, from beginning to end, and she just loved it. And 4 years ago, the day after the election, I called her in tears about the way it had all turned out, and had a nice talk with her. And she was more philosophical than I was about the swinging pendulum, and that it would eventually swing back. And I'm missing her a lot because she died in 2018 and didn't live to see this election. But she liked Joe Biden. He had come to Vinton, where I grew up, and my parents had met him some years ago when he was running for another election. And I remember that they were impressed with him. So I think she would be pleased, although she always wanted to see a woman president. And she was, you know, she had her hopes on Hillary 4 years ago. And she never, of course, lived to see that. But she would have been happy about Kamala. So just thinking about Mom and wishing she was still here so I could talk to her about it.
Thanks, Connie. And her spirit is certainly with us and with you. I'm glad for you sharing that. Trish, did I see you raise your hand there?
Connie, I just have to piggyback on that, because I think the first election that I really was cognizant of was 1960 with JFK. And I remember my parents took me to, with them when they went to vote. And basically it was our next door neighbor's garage. And we went in there, and my mom took me into the booth with her, and she took me into the booth with her until I was probably 10 or 12, and they said, you can't do that anymore, one person. And, but it just so happened about a year ago on a very different website, I came across the boy who was living in the home of which we voted. And I just asked him, I said, do you remember when we used to vote in your garage, and 60 years ago? And he said, oh yes. So I lucked out, and they made the voting age 18 the year I turned 18. And so I got to vote in a school board election when I was 18. And I voted in 3 different states, and it's been different every time, from urban places to a townhouse, or not a townhouse, one of those little town halls out in Mazeppa in the snow. So it's been a different experience. And there, when you go into the booth and you close the drapes were all hand sewn, and they were like little calico curtains. Very different from pulling the lever in Seattle. So I really would rather not vote by absentee, but I felt this year that I needed to, because I love the experience of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Others would like to share? Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
So going along on this theme of parents, I sympathize with you, Connie, that your mom isn't here. I have been working with my mom. She loves going to the election. She has voted in, it doesn't matter if it's just the school board election or the city council, she's there. And she's very proud of the fact that her first election, because of where her birthday fell, she just about was able to vote for FDR, but she missed that election, and her first election was 1948. She voted for Truman. She was one of those quiet people who didn't talk about who they were going to vote for, and then found out the next morning that Truman had won. So she's in Wisconsin, and she's doing absentee, and Wisconsin has the, ballot in the privacy envelope, and has to have a citizen witness, regardless of where the citizen is from. It just has to be a citizen witness. So I have served on as her primary absentee ballot officiant or official, as well as her regular ballot, and then because she doesn't have internet at home, I was the person who was tracking her ballot so that she would know that it had been received and counted. So I've been sort of living my own election experiences with Richard, and both Richard and I voted absentee out at the government building. But I've also been living her campaign and her election 2020 experiences.
Thanks, Anne. Would others like to share? Yeah, Amy.
Well, I worked on my very first election in 1988 when I was in 8th grade, Dukakis Benson, much to the chagrin of my parents. And they knew I was going down the liberal path at that time, and I have not turned back. And I've worked as an election judge. I think this will be my 4th or 5th election voting day working, and I love it. I think it's great. And Luke, you talked about getting your kids involved. When we first moved to Rochester, our polling place was Franklin Elementary. And for those of you who know where we lived, I'd put the kids, well, the kid or both the kids, in the little red wagon and pull them down to Franklin and pull them in the wagon into the school, into the gym, and then they would vote with me, and then I'd pull them home. So yeah, they know what that's all about. And Claire watched us both fill out our forms our ballots this time. We voted absentee by mail and tracked them, they're in. But because she couldn't believe that Kanye West was on the ballot, and she had to see that for herself. So, but we're raising civic-minded children, so that's important.
That's great. Thanks, Amy. Others have stories or writings. Yeah, Paul, please.
I'll start this with a confession. I'm afraid my first presidential vote was cast for Richard Nixon. I have a young friend out west who said to me once that if you're young and conservative, you're heartless. If you're old and liberal, you're brainless. I guess I've been guilty of both. But I remember even in a populated area like San Diego, where I was, voting used to be easy. It was casual. It was fun. And I look forward to it getting back to that. Anyway, that's my words of wisdom on that.
Thanks, Paul. I've told this story a couple times, and some of you may have heard it. But the last election, the polling place was just a block or so away from where we lived in East St. Paul. and we took the girls with us, and we were all dressed in white for the suffragist movement, and voted. And then from then on, Louisa was convinced that that little church where we went is where Hillary Clinton lived. And that every time there'd be like new flowers or plants outside the church, we'd walk by with the dog, and she would go, "Oh, Hillary planted new flowers." And we didn't have the heart to tell her. She didn't live there, neither did she win. But she was engaged for sure. And they'll continue to be. Now that engagement this time has been around our lawn signs or that sort of stuff. And in first grade, they're reading some books this morning on distance learning, one called Grace for President, and these little election things. And they're very curious about it. So it's good. Good and precarious all. So looking forward to a non-pandemic election sometime. Other stories or poems, or what's been giving you some hope or resilience in these days?
Can I bring you in the picture?
Sure, you can bring me in the picture. I'm back. I've been here, kind of in and out. I'm anxious about this election, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And I was in 2016. But
A lot on the line, from national down to local elections. Absolutely.
I worry about what will happen either way. I think there's going to be a big uprising coming, and I think the pandemic doesn't help. I think it helps fuel it because people are generally at unrest. So I don't know. I'm hoping I'll be relieved when a week from now or a week and a half from now, whenever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we will survive. But
Kathy, yeah.
So I too worry about the election, and I guess I wake up each day trying to have a hopeful heart, wake with gratitude, and pray that I guess I'm having a hard time believing what the polls say, because the polls had good news kind of 4 years ago, and it's kind of woke up the next day and it's like, whoa. So, and I too also worry about, an uprising. People I've had enough with COVID, and patience is thin. And I guess, I have gotten really good into a good yoga practice and meditation, and just trying to concentrate on hopefulness. And if the outcome that we all want happens, I just think there's got to be a lot of rebuilding, and that I hope that people don't stop the momentum that they have now, because there are a lot of things that need to be fixed. So it's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I hear you, Kathy. I'm glad you lifted up personal spiritual practice. and the importance of that for resilience and perseverance, and to be able to have a grounded sense of soul and spirit and mind, even amidst the chaos. And I think you're also so right about how much work continues beyond election day, regardless of various outcomes up and down the ballot, and how much work has preceded this election too. It does kind of come to an anxiety focal point at times of election, understandably. And we're continuing work, though, that has been in the works for generations in so many ways, and trying to, I think that's one of the interesting things this time of year, each 4 years at election time, but every year for All Souls, trying to remember how those generations and ancestors are showing up, and how we're continuing some of their work, and trying to not continue some of their work, and discerning a lot of those things for how we move forward. Absolutely. Anyone else want to share something? I see Sandy's finger trying to unmute, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I went to the Women's March in DC in 2017. Is that right? I think so. Last night on PBS, I don't know if any of you watched a program about that march, and many interviews with the women who attended, and that experience was such an uplifting and hopeful experience for me. And I went with two younger women from our church, Angie Gupta and Beth Thompson. And when I listened last night, I finally, halfway through, had to say to myself and John, I just can't bear to watch any more of this. It's just all that hope and all. And people were talking about what is it now, and how is it now for them. And I just too, like Kathy, every day try to get up and find a hopeful center in my space and in my head. I'm very concerned about how I'm going to feel next week and the week after.
Can I speak in?
John speaking.
As long as Sandy's on here, I was actually planned to be somewhere else for this, and then I got on the computer in our den, I guess you'd call it, and I couldn't get any sound. So I finally came out here. I did want to say, on both sides, positive and concerned. We've done a little standing on the corner, waving Biden-Harris, Feehan, Alita signs, and we get lots and lots of thumbs up and honks, and a few negatives. But positive. Don't think I'm really changing votes, but it's uplifting for us. On the other hand, I'm really concerned that if it's reported that Biden has won, that the Trump people will simply pick out enough states to challenge in court, and the court will decide. And I'm daily losing faith in the court, I guess I have to say. So that is a concern that I have, and all I can say is I hope it doesn't happen.
Right.
Well, and then Captain COVID is coming to Rochester on Friday, I see.
Right.
Oh, dear Lord.
The airport.
Thank you for being on the corner there. Good. Mary, did you have your hand raised? Please.
I did. What I don't understand is I have driven this summer through rural Michigan, almost the whole state, and the upper northern Wisconsin, and the number of Trump signs, it just really, really astounds me and upsets me. And even in Southeast Minnesota, or Southeast Rochester, when I deliver Meals on Wheels to some very, very low income, rundown, terrible places where there are Trump signs. And I don't understand what these people, how they're interpreting what he's doing, or how they feel he can help them, or I don't get it. And, you know, I'm hopeful that there will be enough people in cities voting for Biden versus maybe the lower number out in the rural areas. But still, I feel like it's, you know, it's us against them. And that bothers me, that we can't talk about it. We can't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't know. And I see a lot of it because of television and the media. I mean, that influences a lot. And there's an ad on KTTC at about 5:25 in the afternoon that I'm going to email them tomorrow about, because the couple that has that on there, and he must be running for something, but they end up shooting guns at targets. I don't know if any of you have seen this ad. And so the premise is that if we don't like them and agree with them, then we shoot them. And I don't know. It's so I struggle with sort of how to stay positive throughout all of this. Anyway.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I hear you, Mary, for sure.
I think it's not even about issues. I mean, in other elections, you can disagree with people on different issues. But I think at this point, it's come down to morals and values. And that isn't something that's easily, you know, brought into alignment or agreement. You just have to walk away from people because you know that they don't share your same values, and that's a lot harder to overcome than specific issues.
So I'm going to say it's not so much that they, you know, Mary, that they always say the fastest way to craziness is trying to understand how, you know, how other people think. But I think that that's the most disturbing thing, is the cognitive dissonance that happens between people who say something and act one way, but then it's not a deal breaker for them to vote for somebody who does not embody any of those values. Because, I mean, most of you know that I come from a fairly conservative family, and it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. I'm thanking COVID daily for the fact I don't have to spend the holidays with my family, because I think it's going to be a crazy time, and there's no way to understand it. And that's the thing, especially when the people that I know and I grew up with and that I've been around growing up would never have, you know, anybody acting like this, much less the President of the United States. And it's hard to argue with people whose reasoning for voting for someone is the fact that they aren't someone else. And I think that's what happened in 2016 is, well, it's not Hillary, so, you know, that's okay. And I think that that's just been so ingrained that there's just no two ways out of it. So, yeah, it's crazy.
I've had some colleagues recently speak about a different type of feeling or sense of calling within religious communities, more progressive religious communities right now. And some of them will say, what you're feeling right now is moving a little less out, or a little more out of the typical affluent country club feel of a church into more prophetic resistance feel of a church. And the pressure you feel from a culture that does not seem to always be in line with your values, and the dissonance that comes both with your sense of morality, but also your sense of spirituality and pluralism. And what are you then called to in those moments? And it's been a hard a hard thing to wonder about, and trying to learn from colleagues who were part of the civil rights movement and how their congregations were involved in that time. And I know our church has been involved in justice work quite a bit in a lot of different ways over the years. And I think we're also in a time to continue to reflect on what are the best ways we can do that? What inner work can we do in our own psyches and souls and institutions, as well as how to partner in the wider community. But it adds some pressure. The other thing that's, I don't know if it's been heartening or more distressing for the soul. Two things. One from Adrienne Marie Brown, who I've used a few times to quote, that she speaks about things aren't getting worse, they're getting uncovered. We need to continue to hold each other tight and pull back the veil. So something about the public nature and the public rhetoric in the political discourse right now. So much of it is not new. However, there are increased consequences because of the publicness of it and it being accepted publicly. So it's both and there. And then the other from William Barber, the minister who started Moral Mondays and is part of the leading the Poor People's Campaign. I was lucky enough to be at an event with him at Unity Church in St. Paul a couple years back. And he preached and spoke about when the mule is about to die, it kicks real hard. And he was speaking of white supremacy. And he also talked about the recoil that happened after Obama was in the White House, and then the white backlash of white supremacy and extremely public racism. And so thinking about those things puts it a little bit in context for me. It's slightly hopeful, the last thing from William Barber, that I hope I hope white supremacy is dying and these structures of oppression are on their way out, or at least feeling threatened enough because the world is changing. And how do we keep pressure on so that it keeps going that way? And I think that balance some of you named around how do you interact or don't with people or family or friends for which you just feel this moral dissonance. And for me, it comes down to that universalist value of I can still affirm someone's inherent worth and dignity by not wishing them harm. And if I can't interact with them around some moral thing, I either need to disengage or use that energy to engage in other ways, and know that I do not have to agree or like or refuse to correct or refuse to speak out boldly in opposition. And that's not, disavowing their worth and dignity by working against their values too. So trying to hold those things. So the mule is kicking and disproportionately affecting those with less privilege and access and power in a cis heteronormative white supremacist patriarchal world. And so we continue the work in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's Sandy.
So about a month ago, we were sitting on Sue and Phil Wheeler's porch, and we were talking about what it would be like, what would we do if Trump is reelected. And I thought they had a good attitude, and it was, no matter what happens, we in Rochester, Minnesota will continue with all of our might to work toward making our city a better place for all people to live and be. And I think that's the only thing that we can work toward controlling if things do not go the way we hope.
That's great.
Very good.
Yeah, bringing it down to local, manageable, and
Right.
trying to move from those global things you can't control and doing your part, whatever that is. And there's 1,000 different ways to do that. Absolutely. Yeah, Anne.
So sort of thinking about that small corner of our world. So in August, I was worship associate. And as we were ready for that August primary, and I was doing my prep to get ready for my call to worship, I found some inspiration. And so I will share that with you. And if you want, I can send you the link on the UUA website. The author is our very own Reverend Luke. So, because I keep coming back to this throughout, once I found it in August, I've kept coming back to it because it captures both a spiritual aspect for me as well as the importance of voting. So here's what Reverend Luke said 4 years ago. Marking my ballot is like kneeling in prayer because neither will accomplish anything right away. But the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world I am trying to help create. So I rise from prayer and turn in my ballot and remember the who is me and us and we the people. And again I set to the task that is mine, justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world. So thank you, Luke. It sort of kept me sane through all of this noise that we've had for the last 20 months.
Thanks, Anne. That's very nice. Well, I appreciate so much the work that so many in this church and community continue to do. Phone banking and writing letters and cards, they make a difference. Mary, have no question, they do. And thinking about all the folks who have done that and volunteered for campaigns and will continue to do so. As you said, Sandy, that will continue to make their small corner of the world a better, more beautiful place on November 4th and every day after that. That's always our work. That's a good reminder.
And they do make a difference because Julie and I got a card from somebody in New York State talking about why they vote and they hoped we would join them. So it actually made us feel good just to get one of those.
I got one from California, and unfortunately it had Dan Feehan on it, but I can't vote for Dan Feehan. But, but you know, the sentiment is there.
Absolutely.
I got one from Salt Lake City asking me to vote for Dan Feehan. So I got so excited because I mean, whenever you see something and you get something in the mail that's handwritten, it gets your attention. And yeah.
Yeah, we got one too.
Well, I have I know we're coming to the end of our time, just barely over 7:15. But I want to end with first a preview. Just next week, we will gather on Wednesday night. Who knows what the world will be like at that time and how counting is going and whatever, all that. But we will hold space here together for any of you and others that would like to gather. And we'll focus a little bit on healing the heart of democracy from Parker Palmer, some music from Carrie Newcomer. There's some clips from when they did it themselves and some time for conversation as well for their work of how to create, continue to do our work for a better country, world, and democracy. I just want to leave you with these words from Barbara Kingsolver, an excerpt from her poem called Two Flags. I have two American flags. Both were gifts. One was handmade out of colored paper by my younger child. It's a few stars shy of regulation, but nonetheless cherished. Each has its place in my home, so I can look up from time to time and remember that's mine. That emblem wasn't handed to me by soldiers on foreign soil. It wasn't handed to me at all. The flag protects and represents me only because of Ida B. Wells, Lucy Stone, Susan B. Anthony, and countless other women who risked everything so I could be a full citizen. Each of us who is female or non-white or without land would have been guaranteed in 1776 the same voting rights as a horse. We all owe a precious debt to courageous Americans before us. I'd like to stand up for my flag and wave it over a few things I believe in. After 225 years, I vote to retire the rocket's red glare and the bloody bandage as obsolete symbols of old glory. We need new iconography of patriotism. Praise the red glare of candles held up in vigils everywhere by people praying for peace. Let me sing praise to the ballot box and the jury box. What could be more honorable symbol of American freedom than the suffragist banner, the strikers' picket, the abolitionist drinking gourd, the placards of humane protest from every decade of our forward marching history? Give me liberty now, with signs of love and life. God bless Barbara Kingsolver and all of you. Be well into this week. Reach out if you need to talk and vent and chat and take some deep breaths. And as Kathy reminded us, take care of yourselves this week. Do what you can in your little corner of the living room or wherever you're quarantined, and be well. It's great to see your faces.